that I'm really not too concerned about the genetic integrity of. She had Clarkia, she had.
Yeah, we don't want Clarkia.
I don't think but something that won't.
Clarkia is a really sensitive one because it cross mutates so quickly that you lose the distinctions in your own Clarkia population pretty quick.
What about California poppy?
Same thing.
Well, except
although that one's been
California poppy'd work. It's already so degraded.
Not really. There's still some pretty pure stands of it on the mountain that exhibit the yellow ring around the outside of the petals in the fog zone and then not in the not fog zone. So I just wouldn't, I don't know. I have a hard time with that one. I think it's a great idea for, little garden things, but I'm not so crazy about introducing even natives from another population into our population, because we've been isolated for a while now.
Okay.
I just...
In general, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I wonder if there isn't one or two things we could...
I don't know. I'm just worried it'll give people ideas. And like that guy who flew all over California distributing poppy seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of...
Okay.
It'd be great if we could do it out, but you can't control it once you let it go,
Yeah.
That's my problem with it.
That's true.
Yeah. But I like all of these ideas. I think they're great. And I guess the next thing I was going to ask was coverage for the table. Is everybody going to be available that day to take a stint at volunteering?
Yeah, I was there last year, and I think I can be there again this year.
Okay. So it's a pretty long day. We get started setup I think is at 9 o'clock, and then we really maintain the booth until it gets windy, about 3 in the afternoon. And it's a long sunny day.
I'm not sure I'll be there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be there.
All right. Okay. And even if you can come by for an hour and relieve people, it helps, because, you need a chance to go get a Lions Club sandwich.
I had also said that I was hoping we could introduce our carbon calculator that day. And I have heard, at this point, I have heard back from Berkeley. And they're willing to go forward with it, and I'm very, very pleased with that. Unfortunately, personally, I don't feel like I have the spare time at this point, now that we're into as the education subcommittee, we haven't met at all since the DEIR came out, and I feel like that's going to probably, sadly, continue to be the case for the immediate future, so I think that maybe that will not happen.
Until the spring.
But if maybe we could set up a laptop or something, if we've got electricity anyway, where people can use one of the online calculators, feel very blessed by that, because I feel like knowing your carbon footprint is kind of a first step to understanding your impact and making the appropriate changes to lifestyle. And so, if we could even push that just a little bit with like a little laptop with some buttons that go bing, 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 look at me, I'd be super happy.
I have this vision of Barbara sewing with this hand and calculating the carbon footprint of the person she's sewing for with the other hand.
That would be awesome, but I don't know if I'm that dexterous.
Any thoughts on that? Anyone want to spearhead that part of it? I think that might have to wait.
Does the city have an expendable laptop, battery powered?
No.
I think I can probably get my husband to cough up one for the day, probably.
The trouble is the usage of it might, destroy it.
Yeah, that's potentially possible, yeah.
Yeah, other people have had computers there before, but it's hard to see because it's sunny and shady, and so you have to make sure that it's in the shade. And then 2, definitely you have to have a power source because it will not last all day. And I don't know whether the attention span is there for people to do that.
Well, I thought maybe I'd push them over there and say calculate your carbon footprint while I'm sewing your bag.
Yeah, that,
Maybe it would work.
yeah. But I think you'd need someone to actually man the computer to do that.
Okay.
So,
Maybe.
so maybe that's a kind of up in the air. We can sort of formalize that. So are you guys, do you need anything more on that to,
We should double check and make sure all the printed material is still available.
Yes.
okay. Anything else on that? Now we have a presentation on Brisbane's status of receiving Zipcar service, which I've just been thinking about ever since the last time you were here.
As I've been as well, so. Okay, so as you recall, at the last meeting, we introduced the,
Do you want to say your name just
sorry.
for the home audience?
I'm Maria Sagisik-Sid, Principal Analyst with the City of Brisbane, and I'm here to discuss our status on where we're at with taking a look at car sharing in our community. So after our last meeting, we went ahead and contacted the two companies that are doing car sharing in the area, and asked them to give us proposals, which I have here. They gave us a one-sheet scenario summary of what they could offer for doing car sharing. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
so the first one that you have is from City Car Share, and what they're proposing is doing a 9-month pilot program where they will provide they will be responsible for getting the vehicles here, taking care of installing the signage, providing their system to provide members with access, basically their online system for reserving, requesting cars, billing, and everything. Their service will also provide the fuel, the insurance, making sure that the vehicles are clean, provide roadside assistance and maintenance, as well as provide us with reports upon request. What they're asking the city to be responsible for is guaranteeing a minimum usage of $1,400 per vehicle per month. They would have a certain Brisbane account set up and membership fees, as you can see noted there. They would ask us to do part of the marketing support and outreach to potential members, and they would work with us in terms of getting that material over to us and working with us to try and get that marketing out there. And we would also be responsible for providing dedicated spaces. At the bottom, you can see a couple of the sample calculations that they propose in terms of how that would work, in terms of how the usage, as the usage goes up, the $1,400 per vehicle per month would go down. The second proposal is from Zipcar. And basically what they provide is the list of potential benefits that Zipcar would provide for us, which include providing a discounted annual membership fee. The standard membership is, as it notes there, is usually $25 application fee and $60 annual membership fee. And then it's a use as kind of as needed. There's no, that's a very basic membership. What they would provide for us is that we could do the $25 sign up and receive $25 in driving credit without the $60 annual membership fee. There are different memberships where if you, for individuals, if they want to pay something on a regular basis monthly, then their rates are reduced and they would receive what that monthly payment is. Say if they're doing the $50 program, they would receive $50 in driving credit right off of the bat, and then anything over that would be at a reduced fee per hour. They would also offer discounted membership to the city and its affiliates. They would have a very specific landing page on their website for members of the city. They would have discounted hourly rates during Monday through Friday for businesses. This is assuming that if the city actually uses it as part of their fleet. They are also interested in signing up with the Chamber of Commerce as a member. They would take care of marketing in terms of doing active partnerships with us with local charities and events. They would do free membership raffles at select events, as well as in their fleet, they would make sure to provide the cars, pay for gas, insurance, and maintenance. And they also mentioned that they could introduce us to EVgo, which is a program that helps agencies look at installing electrical vehicle infrastructure, which is not a requirement, but it's another thing that they can introduce us to, another party may be able to assist us if we're still interested in looking at electrical vehicles. And with that, their only request from us is that we provide 2 spaces,
2 parking spaces.
parking spaces dedicated for it.
And do we need to do that for city car share also?
Right, we would also designate 2 spaces, or however many car spaces.
And Zipcar did come into town and looked at potential spots in town for the spaces. And I think they were looking,
The areas that they were looking at include possibly City Hall as one spot, the Park and Ride lot over on Bay Shore, at Old County Road and Tunnel Avenue, that section. They've also, when we drove over to the Sierra Point area, not that they would want it as part of this program, they're interested in possibly approaching some of the businesses down there to see if they'd be interested in putting a pod over by the hotels for business travelers if they need a vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
Things of that sort. They did look at a couple areas in the, I'm thinking the post office and also the shopping center. We did explain to them that that's not our property, so it would have to be a negotiation with the property owners on that. But the areas like City Hall and the Park and Ride would be areas that we could provide since it is city property.
Does Zipcar not do the whole feasibility? Do they not have requirements in terms of how much use there is?
They are not requiring us for it, but what they're looking at is doing possibly a 1 to 2 year pilot program to see how well it works. And they've been doing that in other cities currently. Redwood City has as part of their Grand Boulevard program. They told me that they've recently put Zipcars, I believe in, I want to say San Rafael, but I can't recall offhand when we were having, when they came to visit us. They were talking about that, and I believe also they were looking at putting one at Half Moon Bay as well.
So I have a couple of questions. One, what with Zipcar, what would be their equivalent price for reservation?
So the way their structure works is that they have an hourly rate depending on the type of vehicle, and that would range from anywhere, I believe, from $8 to about $12, depending on the type of vehicle. And within that hourly rate, that does cover all of your usage, basically.
But not your gas included?
The gas is included.
And insurance.
And insurance, as well as roadside maintenance if it should come up.
Oh, it's just because this is 40 miles at 35, so there's no mileage charge with
Right,
that.
there's no separate mileage charge.
Okay.
There is a limit, actually, now that I think about it, there is a limit of, I believe, 180 per day, if I recall. And
Yeah.
anything over that, there is a slight.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you can't really take them and drive to Salt Lake City
Right.
overnight, but if you did it over 3 days, you would be able to do it within their mileage thing. You know, so it's not really made for like long distance
Right.
driving, but yeah, there is some upper
Possible,
limit.
but it's not really
Right.
what
If
it's
you took a week to do it, you wouldn't break any mileage charges.
And I guess my next question is for both fleets, how many cars do they have in service in like a 100-mile radius from here?
I would have to go back and ask them, but I do know in San Francisco it is it's quite a robust program.
For both of them, or, I guess what I'm thinking about is the people of Brisbane, if they joined one program or the other, which would be most beneficial for them, and especially in other cities or other places and
They
that
try
type
to
of
be as
thing.
competitive as possible with each other. Zipcar is Zipcar, so you can go worldwide wherever Zipcar is and use their reservation system to reserve. City Car Share is a member of a group of similar types of smaller car sharing agencies that have membership that you can use at their agencies back and forth. So they have, so depending on where you're going, you'd probably be able to find service through either one. I would want to say that Zipcar, I think, is more popular in, I'm thinking universities, and City Car Share hasn't really broken that market, but I don't know if that's really the market that we're as concerned about. But
Yeah. I'm just concerned with overall use and accessibility. If people decide to participate in our program here, they want to participate
They
in.
want to be able to find
Yeah.
it, like if they're traveling.
Or like even if they, are a member of Zipcar here
Right.
and use ours on occasion, but they commute to like Walnut Creek or somewhere else and need a Zipcar periodically at lunch or something,
Yeah.
or a city car share at lunch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Zipcar customer, and I love it. I might only use it once a year, but the convenience of being able to get a pickup truck at a moment's notice anytime I want and only have to pay an hour or two at a time, as opposed to having to go to like a SFO to buy, to rent one for a day, or U-Haul and rent one for a day. It's super convenient, and I have used it when I was traveling to other cities, and I'm like, oh, well, I can just get a Zipcar to do what I need, so it's...
Right. And Zipcar is expanding to a point in San Francisco where they're trying to look at getting parking spaces on street as opposed to in parking lots, which, they'll go through their own process to do that, but that's how much they're trying to look at expanding. While city car share, on the other hand, is usually they contact private residence owners to use their spaces as well. So there's definitely a balance, per se. I think Zipcar, particularly because they have the backing of Avis, who is now overseeing them, they have a lot more purchasing power in terms of being able to get the cars in, turn over the cars once they've reached maximum usage. But that being said, it's kind of nice that with Zipcar, we don't really have a financial commitment to them as we would with city car share.
Anyone have any opinions, comments, other than Kima's rah-rah? I love that.
Well, no, I mean,
Personal
looking at it from the
experience.
perspective of the city, I like the option that has lower commitment to the city.
I do too.
And, I have to say, I have a soft spot in my heart for nonprofit organizations that are working to take cars off the road. So City Car Share has a soft spot in my heart. I have a soft spot in my heart for City Car Share. But I think Zipcar is the better choice, more robust in terms of what it offers at lower commitment to Brisbane.
I had a thought along the line of what Michelle was speaking to, I was just curious what our current population may or may not have committed to already. And does anybody else think maybe just putting a survey up on the city website to see who uses what service, maybe that would be
That's a great idea.
Let's put it at the community day.
yeah. We can promote it there, and I don't know if we want to have it, also have people, to be surveying people at the day in the park, because we might be double sampling some people,
Yeah.
if we also have it on the city website.
So would you have
But
one?
I think that makes more sense, but we could definitely have something at the thing that says, go to the city's website and
Right, because
let us
I
know.
think what might be better is if we just ask the two car services for the number of people within the 94005 zip code.
Well, there you go.
That's actually a brilliant idea.
that's why Stuart.
Can I go home now?
Bucks. No.
Meeting adjourned.
Just proved you're useful, you're stuck.
The other thing is,
To keep my mouth shut.
Would City Hall, does City Hall have much of a car fleet that they
have a
would
few.
benefit?
We have Parks and Recreation uses a car periodically, Public Works uses a sedan periodically. So, we have some use for this service that would, right now we use police vehicles that are no longer available in the police fleet. So it's not like we're paying money out of pocket for a vehicle, but we're still maintaining it, we're still paying for gas and all that. This would, if we brought one or the other program in, this would be something from putting my finance hat on, we would take a strong look at.
my other concern is the level of marketing support that is expected or required by both companies, because that has a cost associated with it that's far in excess of the $1,400 a month when you think of staff time and
And
resources.
Zipcar would actually take that whole thing on, as opposed to city car share, where they want us to really do a sharing of
Okay,
that part.
From a city perspective, like a corporate perspective of the city, Zipcar is the better model for the corporation of a city, of the city. It's, it's less expensive, cost per month, because we're not guaranteeing any use of those cars. Zipcar, has a very good marketing program in place. When Maria started talking about this, I got on the Zipcar website, and, they're located throughout the country, including outside the country. There are Zipcar locations in London. So, I think from a corporate perspective, if you were to ask me, I would say that Zipcar would be the better of the two choices. But as Kima said, is just because it's a better decision for the corporation does not necessarily mean it's the best decision for the community.
I think we have to have some sort of analysis of, what kind of holdings Avis has. Are they like, funding dictators or anything like that? No, I'm just kidding.
I never know when you're kidding, Kima. So I take it the preference, do we want to, vote on taking action or making a recommendation to the council?
Ultimately, the goal is to bring this to council to have them approve an agreement with one car service or the other. If the committee doesn't want to take a definitive action, we can just say we presented it to, and that, we responded to your questions.
Would both companies, or either company, whichever company we chose, would it be a mutually exclusive?
They would request that during
For
the
how long?
program, however long we determine. So with the city car share, they're looking at 9 months. With Zipcar, possibly 2 years.
Okay. I'm ready to take action on it. I don't see any point in dithering any longer, because
One question, though, does Zipcar give you a rate, an hourly rate versus city share?
They do. So it would be an hourly rate depending on the type of car that we have, and it could range depending on the type of vehicle as well as your level of membership. So usually they're anywhere from $8 an hour to about 12 to 15, depending on, again.
But one of the things with Zipcar is if you are a member and you pay $50 a month, you get a certain number of hours for free, and then they start then you start paying after that.
Or they have the membership where you just pay an annual fee, but you don't get any hours.
Right.
So it's the sort of the minimum membership. The thing about Zipcar, if they would probably put like two sedans in Brisbane, they wouldn't necessarily put a truck.
No.
But with a Zipcar membership, if somebody needed a cargo truck, if somebody needed a van or a pickup truck, you could go to South San Francisco or to San Francisco and get one of the Zipcar cars there. You're not limited just to the ones in Brisbane. You can use any vehicle from any of their spots.
And the hourly rate of, say, like, if with city car share, 4 hours comes to $39 at their rate that they showed here. And if you did a Zipcar for 4 hours at $8 an hour, it comes to $32. So I consider those to be somewhat equivalent. And I can see where a lot of people in Brisbane would have use of using a different kind of vehicle, like a truck or something like that. So,
They're also really good for getting a convertible BMW and going up to wine country for the afternoon.
bonus.
They are.
That's probably on the expensive side for their vehicles, though.
Yeah, no, those are definitely more expensive.
And just as
They
a
have that.
comparison, I looked at rental car rates just this week, and to rent a mid-sized car from Hertz with a AAA discount for the day was like $52 or $54, something like that. So really,
And you're still paying for gas and.
you're still paying for gas, and I'm sure they have other fees that don't come up when you do that reservation thing, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the committee would like to make a recommendation, we can bring this forward to council with a recommendation from the committee as well.
So,
I would make a motion that we tell the council that based on the information we have right now, we think that Zipcar is clearly the preferable alternative, and unless, you find out some other information that would change that we recommended to a trial period with Zipcar.
I
There's,
second.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we'll get the information about, we'll ask both companies as to
Yeah.
how many members they have within the 94005 zip code before we go to council.
Yeah, the other thing that I would do is limit the exclusivity to 2 years in the
It's only
hopes,
9 months with Zipcar.
yeah, it's, huh?
It's only 9
City
months.
car
No,
share.
it's 2 years.
It's 2 years for Zipcar, 9 months for City Share.
9 months. for-
Right, so whichever one we choose, I would say 2 years exclusive. After that, negotiable, but I think at that point, it should be opened up to both companies.
I mean, the benefit about having a 2-year for Zipcar is that would guarantee the cars would be here for 2 years, whether or not, how well used they were at the beginning.
Right.
Whereas City, with only a 9 months, what we may find is that it takes longer than 9 months to develop a
Yeah.
user base.
Right,
And therefore, a city car might say, we didn't really get any use out of it.
yeah, that's why I would recommend a maximum of 2 years before we reevaluated it, but not,
Before.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll probably bring this to council in October, just to let you know.
October 8th? Just kidding.
October 8th. No, wouldn't it be?
I was just thinking of all the other deadlines.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it took me a second to realize what October 8th was.
Okay. Got to keep up, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Very
It's
much.
really a good idea. Now our favorite subject, the draft EIR.
So which order do you want to do this in? Do I want to do FP, then talk about the next meeting, and then communications? Talk about next
I think we
meeting?
should talk about communications first, because I'd love to have my questions about communications answered.
Sure.
Oh my God, we have an audience person coming in.
We've locked the door, so, oh wait, no.
Oh, no, she got in.
She's not staying.
Oh, okay.
Watch us on TV.
That was a tease.
You're supposed to lock the door after they get in.
That's what I'm supposed to, watch us on TV. What? We are, watch us. And if not, call.
So that was a rare visit for our city council members.
Who is so terrified she left in 30 seconds.
anyway.
Right. I think that we should talk about the communications first, because we have communications here and then communications that went through, and I have questions about communications. So I kind of want to talk about communications first.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that? Sure. And then we can talk after we do the two about what our next meeting agenda is. So do you want to start, Stuart?
Sure. Just as a reminder, if you are sending information, please don't send it to everybody, because that could be considered a violation of the Brown Act. If you have information that you think everybody needs to know, please send it to me, and I will distribute it as part of the packet or distribute it as part of the meeting, so that way it becomes public information at that point in time.
So does do the two emails about mitigation
Yes.
fall into that category?
Yes.
Okay. Even though the DEIR wasn't mentioned in either of them?
Yes. It's a communication privately amongst members without, that is something that may be considered at a future meeting. That doesn't have, the public is not there to participate in the conversation.
Okay.
And that's always the concern, is that somebody might say, you've come to, as a group, a decision about something without the public being able to participate in it.
Okay. This is really general stuff, though.
It is,
It is?
but because it's not, it's general stuff and it's really good stuff, and I'm really glad you shared it, but I'm very sensitive to the whole issue around the Brown Act, because we need to be, and
I mean, think about it as a person who's on the other side of it. So if there was the city council members sharing, information amongst themselves and trying to define a word, and then you get to a meeting and they've already have the word defined, and the public doesn't get to participate in that definition. People from the public would say that seems inappropriate.
Okay, well, that's exactly what was going on here. We were talking about a definition.
Right,
of-
but that, I mean,
Yeah.
if you see, if you look at it from somebody who has a problem with how it gets defined, it could be seen. And not that I'm concerned that somebody's going to raise an issue about this at this moment in time, but just, it's always good to keep that in mind.
Okay.
Do our agenda packets go online?
Yes.
When?
I don't know.
What is it, 70, is there 72-hour notice? Is that the requirement?
Well, it's required to be available in City Hall 72 hours before we try and get it online at that point in time. Given some of the staffing issues, we're not always as prompt on that as possible,
And the fact that we're having meetings every week.
and the fact we're having multiple meetings.
So everyone has been given a copy now of the mitigation emails that, from Barbara and from Glenn. So I think that we should actually go over them as part of our discussion, and so that they are included in our actual record. But Stuart, the question that came up for me then is that I have a lot of other papers here about comments and everything on the draft EIR from various members. And doesn't that sort of fall in the same category if we don't actually talk about them or discuss them in the meeting?
Well, they are available, so that when you send them to me, I then, at this point in time until Friday, I give them to Tony to include in the packet.
Okay,
So they are then available for anybody who would like to review them to see.
okay. So I just wanted clarification.
So, right, so everybody who's been sending me stuff, hopefully everything that you've sent me is included.
Nope.
In, no?
Nope. I only just sent you my, my other set of notes today, so,
4P?
yeah.
4P is not in here?
Well, 4P's in the packet, but it wasn't posted.
Right,
that what-
it's in this, and so therefore,
Right.
I know Ellen gave me her 4P today.
Oh, wait, maybe it was Elena's I saw.
Maybe it was
Did not
Elena's.
see Barbara's.
I have
Yeah.
I have 4F.
No, but she also did a 4P.
P.
I'm
Okay.
confused about what is what.
It's on the same page.
Is it on the back of the same page?
Nope.
Okay, so this
Okay, we'll
is,
get that done and distribute it tonight as well.
okay, Barbara, I have for you 4F greenhouse gas and emissions, one page. It looks like this.
Yes.
Okay.
And then she also did a 4P, and I know that, and that was sent today, and I thought
And
they
then
printed it.
I have 3 pages from Glenn.
I thought it was 4. I think they made it into really small type.
Let's see.
Some of that.
Well, I did some of that too.
Am I missing one?
Okay, you're right. It's 3 pages.
Okay, 3 pages from Glenn. And then I have,
The comments from John on the questions from Barbara.
wait, this is, here's the questions from you to John.
Right, and then the answers.
Is that what this is? No.
It's right, so there's a question mark, and then there's an answer next to the question mark. So
Oh.
like John says on page 4A, 21 viewpoint, then it
Oh,
goes
I
on-
see.
and then it says worst case building height based on DSP development standards, not an arena. So that was John's answer to Barbara's question.
Okay, that's,
Does that make sense?
yes, it's just,
And it was probably in blue when it was on the computer screen
right, okay. And then I have Elena's comments
on 4P.
on 4F.
4F and 4P,
Yes.
both on the same page.
I wrote it
Oh,
on the same
okay,
page.
got it, all right.
And then the mitigation conversation.
And then what's this one, the OSEC?
Those were the comments, those are what we've translated your comments from chapters 1, 2, and half of 3. So you asked when you would be getting to see some of that back, and so we try to give you some of that tonight.
Okay,
So you could look at it, and then we could talk about it at the next meeting.
okay.
So, but I'll print off Barbara's 4P.
Okay. So Glenn and Barbara, do you want to go over what you had, your part about the mitigation thing? And then Glenn, your response to it? Okay. So that it is in the public record and
Yeah.
not violated any
Yeah.
Plus, it's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I apologize. It was sort of stream of consciousness, and maybe not, how email seems to hit send on its own before you've completely,
Press the button.
before you
Yeah.
even press the button, it just goes, psh.
And I just want to say this, I'm really glad that you sent it, and I think that it's really valuable information, and I don't want any of you to feel like you shouldn't send stuff. Just loop it through Stuart.
Yep, yep. And for some reason, I thought Stuart was on the CC list, but no.
I was sad.
You were, anyway, so I realized in working through this that my internal concept of mitigation means to make it okay, right? Like if something is mitigated, that means it's okay,
Okay.
right? And so that in reading through the mitigation measures in the DEIR, there I have discovered a chasm between what I feel is okay and what the mitigation measures actually accomplish. And so I went looking for what I thought was probably an unbiased and broad definition of mitigation. And in fact, the definition I found is more consistent with what is presented in the DEIR than my internal feeling, my internal definition of mitigation. It just says that, something happens to make it less harsh and less harmful, and that is and that of course is a very broad and sometimes shallow thing. I don't know what else I want to say about that. I mean,
Well, I think it's really important that, there are various definitions of mitigation, and in some cases, it's a debit or a credit or something where, well, we're going to really mess this up here, but as long as we do some good over here, it's kind of like, well, we're going to sin, but we're going to be forgiven because we're going to say Hail Mary 20 times or whatever.
yeah, it seemed very much like that.
It is very much like that.
Yeah.
And we really learned that lesson the hard way with the Northeast Ridge. And so I thought that this was very relevant to everything they were doing with the draft EIR, because they seem to be able to brush a lot of stuff under the rug by considering it either not of high impact or mitigate, or able to be mitigated by some other action. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. And then, so it does definitely stop short of real transformation, as you pointed out in your letter. And then, Glenn, did you want to discuss what you wrote? Because I think it is also extremely relevant.
Yeah, I think if you want to talk about achieving sustainability, you simply have to talk about how much mitigation there's going to be. Mitigation is sort of directional, but it doesn't mean that you've actually accomplished anything. You have to mitigate to a goal or a specific point if you can actually consider the state of mitigatedness to have occurred. And that's the point I was trying to make in my email, that if you read the climate, read climate science, read climate policy, they use mitigation almost interchangeably with reducing carbon dioxide emissions. And, if you reduce carbon dioxide a little bit, you've done a little bit of mitigation. But there really is an implication, at least not as I understand that word, that to use the word mitigate means to make okay. It means that you're doing something in the right direction, but if you're really going to talk about mitigating, climate change, you have to talk about a lot of mitigation, as I described in the email, to achieve a concentration of between 350 and 450 parts per million. So did that help? I mean...
Yeah, I think, I completely understand where you're coming from, that's what mitigation actually means. For me, the sort of aha moment was in finding out that mitigation was not as robust a word as I had hoped it was.
Yeah.
I hoped it had a lot, in my mind, it was much more closely tied with sustainability, but it's not. So it was just something learned.
I think it's also really important to point out in the draft EIR, they talk about mitigation measures, not mitigation success.
Right.
And there is no guarantee that the mitigation measures would actually come to pass or be enacted in several circumstances in this document. And I think that that is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of the work that we have to do in saying, you know, this mitigation measure has nothing backing it up, no research backing it up, no insurance of actually working or even being enacted. And I think that's really important. And then there are certain things that, like, Glenn, you said reaching sustainability as climate policy academics and wonks understand it means achieving mitigation sufficient to stabilize the atmospheric concentration of CO2 at a level between 350 and 450 parts per million. By contrast, business as usual is a path at 550 parts per million, right?
Well, we are on track to reach 550, I mean, it's business as usual, it's just steadily rising carbon dioxide.
Right.
Until, I guess, until we're all dead.
Right. And the truth of the matter is we really don't know where the tipping point is. And I think that a lot of the stuff I read on greenhouse gases in this document was kind of like, well, it's really not so much compared to everything else. And by the way, it's per person, which is also a rapidly rising number. And so I think that that's a real serious issue. So I'm glad that you both brought this to the table for a discussion. I think it really is a good framework for everything else that we're doing here. And we should go back and read this every single time we sit down and talk about mitigation measures. And then Ellen is not here. I guess we're going to start with section 4F, and that is your section too.
Okay.
Lee.
Okay. So I was the one who proposed that we do greenhouse gases and energy sections tonight. And what I actually ended up doing in trying to do greenhouse gases was spending a lot more time with the traffic and circulation and the cumulative impacts section of the DEIR than I did with energy, partly because it's pretty clear from the breakdown of emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in the DEIR that transportation is going to account for an awful lot of the emissions associated with the proposed developments, any of them. But more greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to the community-supported project variants. So I ended up flipping back and forth a lot between the greenhouse section, the traffic section, the energy section, and the cumulative impact section. And what I did was just try to write some general comments rather than going through line by line, or in some places they're quite specific. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read these, but I'll just try to hit some high points.
I only got your comments when we got here.
Yeah, because in that case, I did understand that I was only supposed to send them to Stuart, so I just sent them to Stuart, and not to anybody else.
Okay.
But have we ever gotten the packets before the meeting before?
We send an email out of the agendas to what we have, and I don't know if we did that this time.
We
You had the agenda email.
The agenda early, but normally what we try and do is on the Friday before the meeting if we can, or the Monday before the meeting, is send out the final agenda with whatever information we have available at that time. And I don't know if we got,
That would be good.
right, I don't know if we did that this time.
No. So I'm sorry, we're
Tony's
back to...
taking a note, but he's not going to be here, so his note's useless. Christina needs to remember that.
So we're back to another communications question. So would it have been okay for me to to email them to everybody, provided I also sent them to you? Or am
No.
I supposed to only send them to you?
Send them to me.
Okay.
And if you
That's
send them
what
to me by the Friday before the meeting,
I tried.
I know. I
didn't
mean, I understand the problem here,
Yeah.
but, you know, that would be the best thing, is if we can get information by Friday before the meeting. Theoretically, what we would do is send out, you know, scan everything into the computer, and then send a PDF of the agenda and all the information that we received to that date to everybody. And then we would, then for those people who would like to have a hard copy, because I know Sean has asked for a hard copy of what we do,
Me too.
is to have that available at City Hall.
When you say the Friday before the meeting, you mean 3 business days before the meeting?
Since the meetings are on every different day of the week.
Yes.
some-
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So. Okay.
That's the goal. We don't always, I will tell you, we will not always hit that goal. That will be we will do everything we can to.
So I didn't get these done until Monday evening, so I don't know when the other ones got done, but I didn't get done with 3 days ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I got Elena's this afternoon on my desk when I came back from lunch.
The ink's not dry on mine.
Where she told me that she wasn't feeling well. I think I got one from Barbara earlier and then one from Barbara later.
Yeah, I think I had one of them in like Monday morning or Sunday night, and the other one I
Right.
didn't get until today.
Right. So I mean, and I understand what the problem is, and you might, you might want to take a little bit of time at the meeting just to read through what everybody wrote before you start discussing, and that would be perfectly fine too.
I think that,
And if you do, I can go and print Barbara's other comments that we did not include in the packet.
okay.
So if you give
If
me
they want to do that,
couple
there's
minutes.
quite a bit of stuff.
I'd love that.
Okay, so if you take maybe a 5-minute recess or a 10-minute recess,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just
more than 10,
more than 10.
yeah. And you're going to,
I'm going to go print Barbara's, but that won't take me more than a couple of minutes, but okay. So Tony will take us off the air and put up the little thing that's saying we're in recess
Okay,
on the screen.
thank you.
Okay.
such a page turner.
That's a good point.
I've never fallen asleep in a chair before. I've never been able to, but I was reading the DEIR. I did.
I can't do it sitting on the couch. I have to sit at the kitchen table.
I sit at the chair, read all the time. I've never fallen asleep before, but I fell asleep on this one.
It's a form of avoidance.
Yes.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, we're back from recess, and we're going to continue our discussion on Chapter 4F. Glenn?
Okay. I tried to make these comments as clear as I could, but there's a lot of awkward language, so forgive me. And if anything I've written here isn't clear, I'd be happy to take questions about it. So I started off with 2 comments just on the first few pages, I guess, of the DEIR that talk about greenhouse gases, what they do, what the environmental impacts of greenhouse gases are, and so on. My first general comment, and here I agree with Barbara, the whole chapter is really difficult to read, and actually the DEIR is difficult to read. It's not a narrative. It doesn't bring in a lot of relevant things where they should be brought in my opinion. So to write these comments, I did a lot of hunting and flipping and trying to see what was going on. And in this case, the traffic section was really important because so many of the greenhouse emissions from all these project variations are attributable to traffic. And so if you wanted to examine the assumptions and the models and stuff like that, you had to look at the traffic section. So it was very hard to read. The second general comment I had was on this chapter, and I felt that when they were talking about the environmental setting and the impacts of climate change, they use a lot of oddly equivocal language, and it's a quibble, but I just didn't like it. I mean, we know that greenhouse gases are causing all sorts of impacts. Big report just came out last week, was written up in the Chronicle, and they don't need to equivocate and say that wildfires could become more severe and more frequent because they are more severe and more frequent. So I'd like to see some of that language reflect the actual state of knowledge about this problem. The second thing is, in some ways, this is an educational document, and if you're going to talk about greenhouse gases, you might as well take the opportunity to give the public at least a somewhat better understanding of why they're such a problem. And one of the reasons they are such a big problem, and it's something that, according to what I've read, the public doesn't understand very well, is that they last a long time in the atmosphere. And so you can't, even if you mitigated very dramatically, you can't, it's not like turning off a faucet. You know, you don't get a reduction in global average temperature because you reduce greenhouse emissions. And that's part of the reason we're in so much trouble. It's really like a bathtub filling up, and we're filling it up. So I thought I just gave some examples of things that I thought the introductory material could do somewhat better. But the real substance of my comments has to do with the actual comparison of the estimated greenhouse gas emissions of the 4 project variants, the 2 developer-supported plans and the community-supported plans.
The community
Right.
prepared plan. Sorry.
The CPP, let's call them CPP variants. So the greenhouse gas emissions come from a whole bunch of sources. They come from buildings, they come from cooking, they come from transportation and other sources. And essentially what all of these plans propose to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from buildings by requiring efficiency standards, by siting them and positioning them so that you don't lose the benefits of passive solar and things like that. And there are also plans in all 4 variants for renewable energy generation on site, and the biggest amount of renewable energy generation on site is associated with the Recology variant. But what they do in this chapter is sort of add all that up and come to a net estimate for each of the 4 variants of how much greenhouse gas will be emitted per year from each of these projects. And they claim pretty clearly that the two developer-sponsored plans will have less significant greenhouse gas impacts than the two CPPs. And the basis for this claim, and the developer-sponsored plans are claimed also, the reason they're saying that they're acceptable is that they emit less than the 4.6 ton per capita per year Bay Area Air Quality Management District threshold of significance. Whew, I said it. And we could, I'm not clear exactly what sort of methodology is involved in determining that method of significance, but basically the argument is that if a project results in each person's emissions adding up to 4.6 tons per year, it's assumed to be a sort of efficiency threshold. That is, that it isn't too much per person. I have a little bit more to say about that later.
I think from a CEQA perspective, it's not that it's, I think it's just that it's not significant. It doesn't, as he said over and over, it doesn't say that it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, you could say that adding 3.1 tons per person is still a bad thing.
Right.
Right. So all it's saying is that it's not trying to say that 3.1 is good or bad. It's just trying to come up with a number.
They do mention an efficiency threshold that renders a project acceptable in impact according to Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And they specifically say that it's an efficiency threshold, which does imply that it's more acceptable than not.
Well, I mean, I think I'm trying to channel Lloyd at the moment, that the 3.1 is a lower number than 6.7. I mean, I think that's all it's trying to say in this document. Now, you could, I think, your comments about how is the model and how do they look at the transportation model, and does the transportation model really reflect reality? I mean, those, I think, are comments that make sense and that, a response will happen. But I think the idea of saying that we don't want a project that has a significance of 3.1 is more, I think it happens more at a different level than the CEQA document. I think that happens, as you talk about in the sustainability subcommittee, where we're trying to go to net zero.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
I think we probably need to have a separate discussion about the methodology used to assess the greenhouse gases for these two projects. But I would like for Glenn to just finish.
I'm sorry.
The very clear conclusion that I think we're supposed to draw from this comparison is that the developer-supported plans, sponsored plans, would have lower greenhouse gas emissions, or would meet this threshold of acceptability. They say that several times. So I'm not making this up. It's right there in the DEIR.
It would be lower, per person.
Per capita. And that's the sort of determination that they're using, and that determination, or that threshold, comes from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And I'm not saying anything about their threshold except that I don't really understand it. Okay.
Apparently, you're not the only one who doesn't understand it, because there's a whole discussion in here on page F12 about that the BBAMQMD standards or whatever got thrown out in court, and that the cities aren't required to use them, and BAAQMD should have conducted an environmental review before setting these thresholds. So I don't even know why they're using them. I'm sorry. It clearly says that CEQA is supposed to follow and assume that the laws are being followed, but it sounds to me like it's not by using that because it was thrown out. I'm not understanding this.
Right, and that would be a good comment to make.
I think this is a conversation in itself,
Do you want to stop here and have this conversation and then go on? Or do you,
I don't think we can have this conversation. I mean, I can't,
well,
I can say what I think they're doing here. They are, what they think they're doing is assigning a threshold of significance, which somewhere in this document they call an efficiency threshold, meaning that the carbon emissions per person are below a threshold of significance, meaning that they don't require further mitigation other than
the
what's...
DAAQMD wouldn't require further mitigation?
Yes.
Right, yes.
Yes. So that's the basis on which all these projects are compared, right? And the developer-sponsored plans meet that criterion. The others do not, even though the others also generate on-site energy. The Recology variant generates a lot more on-site energy than the developer-sponsored plans do. The reason why relatively lower greenhouse emissions are ascribed to the developer-sponsored plans is that they have on-site housing. They're mixed-use developments, and that is mostly because they have housing. Both of them do, 4,000 some units on-site. And the assumption behind that, it's a pretty common assumption behind what's called new urbanism. The assumption behind that is if you build a mixed-use development, then a lot of the travel that people would otherwise do by car or by transit, they can do by bicycling or by walking because the grocery store is right down the street, right? And their job is right down the street. That's the whole assumption here. Beyond that, all four of the plans would be transit-oriented. It's assumed that big transit improvements would happen for all of these plans. I'll have more to say about that in a minute. But first, I think the model that assumes that mixed-use development is going to pull these two developer-sponsored plans below the threshold is a little bit iffy. We're not told on the basis of what evidence these models are constructed. And I did a little bit of research on the issue. As I said, I didn't do a comprehensive job of research, but I did do some research, partly because I have access to an academic library. And I found a very interesting scholarly article by Helen Jarvis titled "Dispelling the Myth That Preference Makes Practice in Residential Location and Transport Behavior." It appeared in the journal Housing Studies in 2003, which is a peer-reviewed journal. And she's talking about this very assumption common to urban planners and the new urbanism that if you build mixed-use developments, you will reduce greenhouse emissions because you internalize a lot of the trips, and they're short enough that you don't need a car and you don't need transit. And she really takes it apart, not because she doesn't favor this kind of development, but she says that in some ways, it's another example of there's the kind of thinking that says there's a technological solution to every problem. In other words, you build the right kind of development, you'll reduce greenhouse emissions. And she's saying based on, she did not just survey research, but what I've called in here, I don't know if that's the right word, biographical research, where, and she did her research in 3 cities, one of which was San Francisco, one of which was Portland, and I'm forgetting I think it was Seattle was the third one, yeah. And she says that very clearly in her article that mixed-use development does not reduce trips outside the project as much as the developers seem to think, or as much as the new urbanists seem to think, because she's saying life has gotten really complicated. She says in affluent cities, a lot of people are, 2 career families or 2 job families, and so, operating on that assumption, a household with 2 adults, one person might have a job on a project site, but, when you start thinking about whether both people are going to work in the perimeters of a development, it's a lot less likely. She talked about school preference being a big issue for a lot of people. She talked about the fact that a lot of people travel and they have weird schedules and weird hours, and so they may do their shopping on the way home from somewhere else. It was quite an interesting article, and I recommend it. And I don't know that I don't know that it single-handedly destroys the assumptions on which these relative greenhouse gas emissions projections were made, but it certainly made me doubt that we can assume that because it's mixed use, it's going to pull the project below that BAA QMD threshold. Whether that's the right threshold or not is a different question, but the projects are compared on that basis, and the two developer-sponsored plans pass on that basis. The other two don't. And so she casts a lot of doubt on that assumption, and I felt like her points were very good. It is not clear to me whether the sort of questions that she was raising are dealt with in the model that was used to project greenhouse emissions from these 4 different projects. I just don't know. But I have my doubts. And if the projections are wrong, then it may not be true that the developer-sponsored plans fall below the BAA QMD 4.6 ton per person per year threshold. And if that's the case, then all 4 of the variants would have a significant, unavoidable greenhouse emissions impact. Okay, I don't know that that's the case, but I think it may be. And that's according to the BAA QMD. Right now, I'm just accepting what they say, that that's the threshold of significance. But I'm not sure that the developer-sponsored plans actually succeed in meeting that test. The other problem, and this one is true, I think, for all 4 of the plans, because it's assumed that there are going to be big public transit improvements. There's supposed to be the Geneva extension and a bus rapid transit line that goes down Geneva and then up through Harney, which will connect Candlestick, I think it is, with this proposed development. There's supposed to be a multimodal Bayshore Caltrain station. There's supposed to be a Muni T-line extension. And those are the big 3 that I remember. Does anybody remember other big transit improvements? I think those are the big ones. The trouble is that the DEIR mentions that these improvements, these proposed improvements, are unfunded. Right? It's not clear where the money is going to come from. So they want to build them, but they're not built, and there's no money to build them. And so if the transit improvements aren't there, then the greenhouse emissions go up for all of them, for all 4. The second sort of small point on transit is that if you look in the traffic circulation system, they have a table there that breaks out, at least projects, the destinations outside the project that they think people will be commuting to and from. About 20% of the trips are projected to be south of the project. That is, they'd go to Brisbane, or they would go further south to South City or Redwood City or San Jose or somewhere. And here the transit picture gets looking kind of ugly, because they clearly are counting on Caltrain. And especially if we're looking at public transit south of the project, Caltrain is going to be, as I call it here, the heavy lifter, because the 292, it's the bus line that goes up and down Bayshore, is infrequent and inexpensive. If I've ridden that line because my car got stolen, and so I had to commute to Brisbane by public transit for a while. And
you mean infrequent and expensive?
Infrequent and expensive, yeah. If I had to get home from San Francisco State and I didn't get off work by 6, it could take, I think one night it took me 2.5 hours to get home using public transit from San Francisco State to Brisbane, because you have to ride Muni all the way downtown, and then you catch that thing, and it's an hour between buses. So how practical that is as a commute vehicle, I don't know, because lots of people have to work late, lots of the time. It's also expensive. If you ride it from San Francisco, you have to pay a $3, let's see, what is it? The fare is $4.
$4, yes.
Yeah. For some unknown reason, I guess.
Because they charge the fare as if you were going to the end of the line because they have no way to kick you off the bus when you reach your destination.
I thought it was maybe crossing a county line. Anyway, the 292 is not going to cut it, so they're obviously counting on Caltrain, but Caltrain funding is really precarious. It's really weird looking at Caltrain. On the one hand, they're talking about electrifying the trains and making big improvements to Caltrain, but I found several articles saying that when it comes to the operating budget, Caltrain's in real trouble. And I remember seeing articles in the Chronicle about that earlier this year, that they don't have a dedicated source of funding for Caltrain. So even if they do all this upgrading to the system, it could be a situation where the capital budget and the operating budgets are different, and they think they have the money to improve the system, but they don't have the money to operate the trains. That does happen. I'm not sure that's the case, but I did paste a little bit of text from Palo Alto Online, which talks about the funding situation, and it's precarious, especially after 2015.
The other part about Caltrain is currently all the schedules and the whole transit system is geared towards people coming from the South County to San Francisco and not the other direction.
Oh,
Having taken it for a couple of years. Like all the ancillary shuttles are all geared towards southbound commuters. Like people coming to San Francisco, not going to Menlo Park.
oh, just thanks for that. I didn't realize that. So just one other thing about transit. There's really no transit connection between the project site and central Brisbane except for the 292. That's it. And so that says to me that because it's a fairly good hike or bike ride over there, that people that we're still talking about two separate parts of Brisbane that aren't going to be knitted together by any transit thing that I saw in there. Caltrain, as we all know, doesn't stop in central Brisbane. So there's really no link.
292 doesn't link it either.
Yeah, it does, because
It
you
goes
could
around
catch
Bay
it.
Shore.
Well, yeah, but you could still ride, if you could get the 292, you could catch it, on Bayshore and ride it down here. So I'm
Yeah,
not
but you
sure.
have to hike out to Bayshore to get it.
Yeah, from the project, you would have to hike out to Bayshore.
And there's no
Yeah.
pedestrian overpath across the
Yeah.
railroad tracks except for at the Caltrain station.
So I don't know how much difference that would make in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's probably important for other reasons. Anyway, if the transit improvements are not funded, not planned for, then can we count on the greenhouse gas emissions being what they project they're going to be? And the answer is, I don't think we can. Then, even if the transit improvements do materialize and reduce auto trips to and from the proposed project, any additional traffic resulting from the project itself, and I should have put in auto traffic, and from the 14,000 units of housing that will be located within a mile of the Baylands. And I added up, I went to the cumulative impacts chapter, and they give the distances there. Where will these how far are these new developments from the proposed project? And I added it up, and within 1 mile of the Baylands, there are 14,000 additional units of housing. So if we've got additional car trips from the project, not a whole lot of additional car trips, but even some additional car trips, and some additional car trips from the 14,000 units of housing near to it, what's going to happen to 101? And actually, they say elsewhere in the DEIR, I think in Chapter 2, that the freeway impacts are going to be horrendous and not mitigatable. But I don't, it's certainly not at the by the project itself, but I don't know if they factored in the additional greenhouse gases from parking lot 101, which is what it's going to turn into. In the traffic and circulation chapter, it says that 101 already operates at E or F levels of service, which is pretty bad during peak hours. And so you think about adding a few thousand extra auto trips a day to 101. Gee whiz.
It will have significant impact. When they built Oracle, it completely changed the commute along the peninsula on the 101.
Yeah.
So between Oracle and the San Mateo Bridge is absolutely horrible during commute. It's a parking lot.
Of course.
And that was just one development that added to the already overstressed.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me like even if they don't build any of these project variations, that the impacts on 101 from the other ones are going to be huge. Just incredible. Another thing I wasn't sure whether they'd factored in here was going back to mixed-use development. There are 14,000 units of housing planned for within 1 mile of the Baylands. Wouldn't you get some of the benefits of mixed-use development by those people living close to jobs on the project site?
In theory,
I think I asked Mr. Zola that exact question, and
Oh, yeah?
my understanding, or the way I interpreted his answer, was that because those are outside of the project and not within the scope of the project, can't be controlled by the project, they are not considered by the project.
Okay.
So,
only by the cumulative section.
yeah, so it's kind of weird, because it's kind of is and isn't, you know? It's considered in cumulative traffic and circulation impacts, but it's not considered in terms of, as a mixed use would be considered.
Okay.
So it's in and it's out, depending.
Yeah, so what this is adding up to is, they have very precise estimates of projected greenhouse gas emissions, and how much can we trust them? The more I hear, the less I believe those precise estimates. And then finally, one thing that did not seem to be factored in, and maybe again it's because of off-site, because it involves off-site truck trips, is that Recology wants to expand in order to reduce its truck trips. So that's a greenhouse gas offset.
Plus,
Yeah.
they'll be using, they won't be using diesel, they'll be using
Biogas.
biogas.
Right. Right, should have thought of that. So that neither of those things seems to have been accounted for in the DEIR. Last big comment I had is that regardless of BAA QMD thresholds, California is committed to reducing its overall greenhouse gas emissions to 80% below 1990 levels by 2050, which comes pretty close to decarbonization of the economy altogether. And it just seems to me that means, first of all, we should have had the renewable energy project variant evaluated in the DEIR, and that all four of the projects, not just the community-supported ones, or city-supported ones, need a greenhouse gas plan, which is what they call a mitigation plan, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I suggested some measures on my last page. Charging stations for electric and plug-ins, free shuttle service to Brisbane, capture of landfill methane, burning landfill methane for energy, solar installations on commercial industrial facilities in central Brisbane to offset project emissions, and potentially solid waste power generation. Those are just a few ideas.
Barbara, did you want to go over yours, or should I ask questions, or how do you want to do that? Do you want to go over the things that you had?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or comments specifically targeted towards Glenn, I think maybe we should do that first, and then...
I have one, in that did they factor in the proposed housing in the in the developers' plans with the greenhouse gas emissions in addition to the auto? Or are they keeping that separate from?
No, what they have is a cumulative total, but it's broken, projected emissions from housing and, energy, other energy use, minus the renewable energy that's produced on site. So that's all in there. I forget which page it's on, but it's all in there.
Yeah, I have questions and comments about that when we get there.
I just wanted to add on to what Glenn said, and really the big scope you took of it.
Thanks.
I wanted to point out the Samtrans came very close to canceling 292 service up into San Francisco very recently.
Right.
So, how can you count on that? I also happen to have in my book here, I think it's Climate Action Network's carbon footprint, and they have a world target of 2 metric tons per person in order to combat climate change. So that, that's somebody else's opinion, but it just so happens to be about half of what BAMCO's target is. So.
Oh, yeah.
And then we already talked about the housing units not being factored into the mixed use. Also, another point I wanted to make, which I sort of touched on in my notes, but it really didn't do a very good job of fleshing out, is the fact that if they can count somebody in housing and they can count somebody and say the same person also works there, then essentially they get to count that person twice. And so that it really gives the variance with the on-site housing a disproportionate advantage, because if you can count all those people twice, then you practically double the number of people you're dividing the carbon emissions by. And I don't really know that that's a genuine reflection of reality.
It's another big methodology question. Like, did they do that? I don't know that they did that, but we should ask about it.
Well, it's service personnel. It's so it's the number of people who live there and the number of people who work there. So they take the whole number of bodies that might be there in a 24-hour period, and they use that number to divide it by. Now, regardless of, what respective commercial sector produces per capita versus residential sector produces per capita, it's really screwy.
Yeah, in addition to saying there won't be any car trips, then they count them twice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, I had a couple questions that might need to go back to Zola, and that is on page 4, the emissions sources are listed only total 63%, and I'm curious what comprises the other 36%, because they already have an other category. So when 1/3 of the specified, that just makes me wonder what they're talking about.
I'm sorry, what's the question again?
Page 4, third paragraph, it gives the emissions. I tried to keep my notes short, so I didn't type everything out. So I will actually have to go to the page myself and tell you. Bay Area industrial sector, commercial sector, accounting for 36% of each Bay Area's emissions in 2007, electric generation 15%, residential fuel 7%, agricultural 3%, and 1.2% of other, I think it is. So total, that totals
You're talking about the Bay Area emissions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that only totals up to about 2/3 of 100%, 63%. So I'm just, that just left a big question mark for me. And maybe it's relevant and maybe it's not, but I always get a little suspicious when something large is left out of the pie.
Looks like they left off landfill emissions, which are actually a pretty big category elsewhere.
Yeah,
And I'm sure they are here too.
yeah, so,
They do talk about landfill emissions somewhere else in the DEIR. I've been through it so many times, I don't remember, but I think they left it out of that.
yeah, it would be hard for me to think that that was 36% of the total emissions, but maybe it is.
What, landfill?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It could be.
close to, next to transportation, it's the second biggest source,
And
as they say elsewhere.
when they say the transportation sector, I don't think that includes car trips. I think that includes things like
Yeah, it does.
airplanes.
It does. It includes cars.
Yep.
Okay, well,
And it probably doesn't include airplanes.
well, I think in regardless, it bears some clarification.
Yeah, it looks like they left out a big category, and I think it's probably landfill.
Yeah.
Solid waste, I mean.
And also on page 5, when detailing the existing emission sources for Brisbane, it does not appear that they account for 101. I couldn't, and maybe they do, maybe it's just rolled into there, and I didn't specifically catch it, but I know that when Brisbane got assigned, when the area got assigned its goals, the stretch of 101 that is within Brisbane is assigned to Brisbane, right? We're responsible for those missions.
So if they went by the city inventory, then 101 is in there,
Okay.
because that turned out to be the biggest chunk of emissions for Brisbane is our share of 101.
Could you clarify that, have that clarified?
Yeah, well, can you,
I'm pretty sure they just went by the
Yeah, but let's make
inventory
sure.
they referred to.
I mean, it may be in there, and I just didn't.
You just didn't read the 6,000-page appendix?
I'll try. And then I had a long criticism here of the way that the DEIR is composed. It doesn't necessarily need to be a narrative, but I did think that it should at least follow the general form of an expository essay. And what follows is 56 paragraphs of contextual information, basically boilerplate. Boilerplate they could have lifted from anywhere and stuck in here.
And undoubtedly
It is
did.
not
Relevant to us?
particularly relevant to Brisbane's specific needs or situation. And so it was very disappointing for me that we get practically halfway through this section before they even talk about what's going on in Brisbane. I mean, I think that a certain amount of contextual information is important, but the fact that it's just all, boilerplate, it's like designed to make somebody fall asleep before they get to the information.
Which isn't there.
Which isn't there. I mean, they have, methodology is mentioned only briefly. I think it's like 2 or 3 paragraphs. And for me, methodology, I would rather them push the regulatory settings to the appendices and discuss more directly the methodology. But that's not what they did. And then the secondary purpose of the chapter, which is to see if the project would conflict with policy and regulation for reducing greenhouse gases, is addressed only on page 23 as a repetition of the formal analysis, i.e. 6 metric tons was determined to be too large and 6 is still 6, so thus far it's still too large, and it was basically just a rehashing of the former thing. So in terms of a factual-based essay, a document that's supposed to communicate facts and information, it fails. I mean, at this point blank, especially this chapter, just falls down. And then when comparing, and my other point, my other big general area is when I was comparing table 3 to table 2, the mitigation measures soil reduction in the following areas: electricity, natural gas, and solid waste due to the mitigation measures. However, no reduction is reflected in the numbers with regards to motor vehicle emissions, even though there are mitigation measures prescribed. So why is it that we're assuming that these other mitigation measures are going to be effective, but the vehicle emissions mitigations get a big zero? Now, as Glenn said, we don't have any way to know that these mitigation measures are going to come true, but the fact that they're numerically zero seems to kind of be odd. I don't know if that would, to me it reads like an error, but of course I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing and I don't understand.
My assumption for those was that they were built into the trip estimate, whereas the other mitigations were specifically shown because those are under the control of the project developer.
Okay.
But it's just an assumption. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I had several comments. Should I?
Please, yeah, that was basically my...
So I started out with, in the very first paragraph, it says impacts of climate change on the project site, including sea level rise, are addressed in hydrology and water quality. And so I flipped over that to check on that, and basically it's baffle them with bullshit, because there was very little about that at all. And it basically said, like 100 yards, and we should definitely pinpoint that when we go through the hydrology part. And then, when the next part talks about the projected warming of temperature over the next 100 years, and so one half of the project life is 50 years, and I don't understand why then they're not talking about significant sea level and temperature rise, if that's what the projected global average temperature is, over the life of the project. On page 4F2, paragraph 1, it says, it talks about the breakdown of the greenhouse gases, and it says, they talk about these gases being produced, like sulfur, hexafluoride, et cetera, which are byproducts of certain industrial processes. And I would like them to define what industrial processes. I know that most of our discussion is about CO2e, which is they go on to describe what that is, being the carbon, the hydrocarbon, how it's equivalent. Sorry, it's a little confusing, and the baffle with bullshit thing is actually working. But if the total is calculated on a per pound, then why are we looking at it on a per capita basis? And I really want to know what these other chemicals are, because later on they mention that those chemicals are, well, I'll get to that. On page 4F3, it talks about the CO2e is being about 21 tons per year per person. And so I'm not sure I understand the difference between the tonnage that they're talking about here. If it's the U.S. emissions is 21 tons per year per person, then why are they using a threshold of 4.6 metric tons? And then on page 4F, they go ahead and talk more about the, I wanted to question this. Is this really true? In California, emitted approximately 550 million tons of CO2e. Are they talking about metric tons there again, or are they just talking about tons? And they talk about California having the lowest capita of GHG emission rates, but because we have a mild climate, but our mild climate will change, and because it's per capita, we have a very high population density in California. And then down in the next paragraph where it says about the California energy, it says that transportation is the source of approximately 41% of the state's GHG emissions, followed by electricity generation. And so really, if we did alternative energy, shouldn't that reduce the GHGs because we wouldn't be using them to generate electricity? And I don't see where that was really taken into account.
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Well, it says here, it says, followed by electricity generation, both in-state and out-of-state, at 23%, and industrial sources at 20%, being what's causing, the greenhouse gas emissions.
Right.
But I don't see where they've taken into account a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions if we generate alternative energy.
So on page...
That's on page 4F.
4F17 on the chart.
It's not on the chart, this is the paragraph
Right.
where it says there.
But you're talking about, do they take into account if there is more renewable on site, do they take that into account in reducing the greenhouse gases?
Yes.
So on page 4F17, you have the amount of greenhouse gases produced by electricity, and then on a line below it says renewable energy generation and a negative. So the more you would produce on site, the bigger that negative would be.
Okay. And then it talks about, on the next page, the city's 1,265 metric tons per year of generation, and I really question the relevancy about that. And then it also talked about Brisbane in 2005 non-governmental activities and operations at 160,944 metric tons for the whole city of Brisbane in 2005. And so that didn't seem to make sense to me when I looked at the chart that they had in comparison to that.
Probably because it includes traffic from 101
Well,
as the biggest single, as by far the biggest single component.
what I'm saying is in 2005, the little city of Brisbane, as it was in 2005, was estimated as generating basically 161,000 metric tons of CO2.
That's because they,
Right. Well, let me finish my question.
okay, but that's from 101.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm looking at this estimated emissions chart over here on 4F17, and they're saying that the total emissions is, for this project is like 86,203, and yet they're talking about, the doubling the population and 12 million square feet. So I'm not sure how that really ties out.
Right, so
if
if
you
it
counted
does-
101.
Right, so if you include 101, and Mary, you probably correct me if I'm wrong, but 101 was 80% of our emissions,
Sounds about right. I
right?
don't-
So that would mean that we are producing about 32,000 metric tons currently as our non-101 source. So that 32,000 tons would compare with this 86,000 tons. So it'd be more than double.
And how many million square feet do you think Brisbane has right now in terms of?
Probably 4.5. When you include Crocker Industrial Park, which I think has about 3 million under roof, and Sierra Point, which has probably probably another million and a half under roof.
So,
And then so that's probably, we probably have about 4.5 at the moment.
so if you took 32,000 metric tons and multiplied it by
Double.
4, 3,
Well, they're talking about double the amount of commercial under roof and triple the amount of resident. So you'd expect probably somewhere around 2.5 times. Just from rough numbers.
Yes. It seems like it does not high enough that what they're calculating.
Brisbane has a lot of old buildings that leak a lot of energy.
Yeah,
And those will be new buildings that supposedly won't do that.
supposedly. But it's an incredible increase in square footage.
Well, they're looking at adding, under the DESP, I believe they're looking at 7.7 million square feet.
Right.
Which is less, a little less than double what
8.1.
we currently have.
8.1 million.
Okay, okay, so double what we currently have. And then their housing is 4,400, but their connected housing, as opposed to where we have single family, much more single family housing. So even if you say, if you double what we have, we'd be at 64 million metric tons, and they've added another 22 million metric tons. I think from a ballpark figure, that's probably not unrealistic. I mean, thinking about it like that, it may not be unrealistic, but I understand the point. And, it's probably more explained in the models, which are part of the appendices.
Yeah, I'm not understanding the math that they used either, because when they talk about removing the 231,400 square feet, and that's an equivalent of 2,762 metric tons per year, which totals 84 metric tons per square foot. But then you multiply that by 12.1 million square foot, and it's like 1,008 million metric tons. So I'm not understanding their math.
Can I just say something? The truth is, they're just making this shit up. I mean,
I know they're making this shit up.
it's the reason it's so difficult to read this chapter is because there's all this phony there's all these phony statistics that are based on models that probably have very little bearing with reality. And I think we should just say that we're not impressed by this, as, what was Glenn's phrase? Misleading
Math?
misleading, yeah, misleading concreteness, right.
Misleading precision.
It's nonsense. It's all nonsense.
Right, but we have to point it out line by line, otherwise they just gloss over it again with more models.
I don't, they're probably not going to change anything, and I don't really think we do need to point it out line by line, but I think just for example, they say that, of course, these aren't going to be all new trips, but we're going to assume that they are, and it's, they know it's bullshit. We know it's bullshit, and what it comes right down to is whatever gets built out there, we need the absolute maximum program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, and I don't think that we should, I mean, if you look at the cumulative effects of what they plan on building out there, it is planetary suicide. And therefore, I don't think that, and if we don't point that out line by line, math by math, I just think that they're going to be able to do it. So moving on 4F6, it talks about endangerment finding of all these different weird gases. And so what creates these gases, and are we at risk of having those gases besides the massive amounts of greenhouse emissions? Yeah.
Can I say something? The endangered.
Can you speak to the
endangerment-
microphone?
I'm sorry. The endangerment finding refers specifically to greenhouse gases and to the greenhouse qualities of these gases.
Right.
And it basically meant that if the EPA found that greenhouse gases were dangerous because of their global warming effects, that then EPA should go ahead and regulate greenhouse gases, which Washington has still not managed to quite get around to doing. It doesn't refer to any other effects of those gases, which will be dealt with in toxic air pollutants. But CO2 doesn't really have any other effects. It's not toxic. It just traps heat.
Yeah, but they're talking about all these other gases, and it says the atmosphere threaten public health. What do they mean by that?
It means that the greenhouse consequences of these gases do present a threat to public health from warming, from spread of disease, from heat stress, from things like that. It's basically they're talking about climate change here.
Right. I
Well, there's
understand
enough
that.
nitrous oxide in the atmosphere, we could all walk around high all the time.
I'm sorry.
Well, I guess I would like them specified, Stuart, of what,
What's specified?
the current and projected concentrations of the 6 key well-mixed GHGs, besides CO2, there's several others, threaten the public health and welfare. Are there specific threats other than, incineration of the planet?
There are, but they wouldn't be dealt with in this chapter, which is about greenhouse gases.
But these are
And
included in the greenhouse
effects.
gases.
Pardon me?
These are included in the greenhouse
Right,
gases.
but there are other effects, if any, will be dealt with elsewhere.
Right, so, I mean, my understanding of the way that greenhouse gas works is they talk about CO2e, but CO2e is not really CO2 per se. It's this combination of these 6 gases
equivalent.
get combined into an equivalent to CO2.
It's kind of like,
So what Glenn is saying is that in this chapter, they talk about this as CO2e, and then the comment would be more appropriate in a chapter on hazardous materials, maybe?
air pollution.
Air pollution, well,
they talk
air
about.
quality, right?
Yeah.
Right, so that would be a better comment on the air quality chapter, so we just have to remember it for the air quality chapter.
But here's where they're mentioning it. So I'd like
Right.
But they're mentioning it in terms.
In terms of GHG.
Context.
So what you have to do is you have to have them mention it again in the air quality chapter and explain it in the air quality.
I imagine they will. I mean,
I imagine they won't, but
Well, that's how it's. You're right. This is not a narrative where, it's read in that fashion. They break out each individual effect in individual chapters, and they don't really show the cumulative effect of, of CO2. They'll show it separately in different places. They'll show the effect of CH4 separately in different places if there's an effect in different places.
okay.
Excuse me, Kima and I are like fading fast. I kind of can't do this anymore tonight.
Okay. Well, I just want to, I'm almost done, and I just want to point out that you can't use the B, I don't think that they should use the BAAQMD as the threshold, because it's been already thrown out of court, and they have a whole page, and so I'd like them to find some other threshold.
And then the question would be what threshold, and I heard that there was one at 2.1 from some, I'd heard that comment earlier, that would be another potential threshold.
Yeah, it's I believe it's Climate Action Network's carbon footprint is recommended to fight climate change is 2 metric tons per person.
Right, so so what you would do is the comment would be is that, the AAQMD, is potentially been, not, because it's been challenged in court, we recommend using the 2.1 from this other source as the significance level. And then when you look at what makes something, significant, then that would bring both of those projects above the significance level. And, so I think that's the way that the comment would read.
So can you make it so?
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
one thing about that, though,
Make it so.
one thing about that, though, is that when you look at a person's greenhouse gas footprint, that includes everything that person uses or wears, or, any air trip. So you can't necessarily apply that to a project, because a lot of the footprint of an individual person is going to be outside the project. It's, did you eat an imported banana on your cereal today? That would be part of your greenhouse footprint, your carbon footprint. Yet the developer doesn't have any control over that. So I think, as much as I, in general, agree that we need to crank this down, and I sort of said that myself by saying we've got this huge drop that we're supposed to achieve as a society by 2050. And so we do need to do anything we can to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But I think trying to tell a developer that the developer has to reduce emissions to an aspirational threshold, I'm not sure that would work, at least not at this point. there are too many things going on outside the development.
Well, then pick a threshold that, at least is supported by the law.
Can we continue the discussion on the greenhouse gas emissions to the next meeting?
Yes, sure. And that will be either,
August 19th, or,
I thought council was meeting on
no,
that.
August, you're right.
It's on the 19th.
Council meeting's on the 19th. August 25th was one date, and I don't
We're supposed to
remember.
meet on Saturday, the 24th, I think.
Yeah, Saturday the
Saturday.
24th is our next,
Either the 24th, sorry,
Yeah,
or, and my understanding was we were going to cancel the 24th meeting if council extends the comment period.
yes.
And so then the next meeting would be on the 29th. And at the moment, we have only one item on the 29th, which was the hazards and hazardous materials. So do we want to include greenhouse gases? And,
I just want to point out, we didn't even touch P.
right, I was going to say, do we want to include greenhouse gases, energy resources, along with the hazardous materials on the
How do you feel about that, Mary? It's going to be a long meeting.
Oh, no, wait.
Okay, so you just want to do greenhouse gases and energy resources on the 29th?
On the other hand, I don't,
We can start. I mean, we'll just see how it goes.
Right, but I just have to notice something that we might be talking about.
Okay, yes.
So I can notice,
But say we're going to talk about it all, but.
okay.
Let's set aspirational objectives.
Or
Stretch goals.
just out of curiosity, do you want to postpone hazardous materials and talk about traffic and circulation? Because what Glenn was saying was that seems to tie in.
yeah.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean,
Two for one night? Let Clay know.
The first one.
I don't remember, but you told me. It was a good idea.
greenhouse gases and traffic and circulation rather than hazardous materials.
Right, so we're going to do greenhouse gases, energy resources, and traffic and circulation will be the three that we post for the next meeting. And
Good idea.
either the 24th or the 29th, and my understanding, I think there's probably there's a probability that there will be an extension given. Not that I know exactly.
the traffic chapter is going to get into a lot of issues that don't necessarily seem to be under the purview of this committee, like emergency access and stuff like that.
Well,
Do we want to discuss them? And
but I thought you were saying that there was aspects of it that related to the greenhouse.
well, I talked about most of the aspects that relate to
Oh, okay.
greenhouse gases. So, and I did that much more than I intended to. It's just the way it worked.
Okay.
To understand their projections and stuff, it involved traffic. So I don't know, maybe we could have a short meeting next time and just wind it up really quick. Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh, that's not likely. Well,
What, I think we should set I think we should set aspirational goals.
Would it be better if you start a little bit earlier?
No,
Okay.
not for me.
so for the next meeting, which will either be Saturday, the 24th, or the 29th,
We're going to, the three chapters that we were going to, that I think, that I hear, I guess then it would be greenhouse gases, energy resources, and hazards and hazardous materials? Because I just heard that, I heard one person say no traffic, but I haven't heard a,
didn't say no traffic, I just said I thought it was supposed to be done.
Are we going to,
by you, but none of the rest of us have done traffic yet.
right,
Right.
are we going to, are we asking the oversight subcommittee to come to our next meeting?
we could? You want them to come to the 29th meeting?
The oversight,
Or the city council's liaison committee,
who are you talking about?
The city council liaison sub.
which I think is Cliff and Ray?
And this is on sustainability?
No, the Cliff and Ray are the liaison with the Open Space and Ecology Committee, so they could report back about, what the, what they've done for extending it, and then, if you would like, you could have a conversation with them about what information they are looking for from you. I mean, that would be the purpose of inviting them to a meeting. That would,
Is that the committee's wish?
We already kind of asked for those instructions at the last meeting.
I thought we'd already pretty much agreed on that.
okay, so,
I didn't remember that, but then I haven't reviewed the minutes either.
To ask, you mean?
Oh, my goodness, the minutes.
I have one question, Stuart, on the question submitted to, with regards to, do we have information on the underlying property owners of the site? And the response was no.
yes.
Yeah, that's
Doesn't the city of Brisbane have tax records for who the property owners on site are?
I just responded the way that John, I just gave you the information John gave me. The county is the one who keeps the information as who that is.
And the city of Brisbane doesn't have access to that information?
Yeah, that was really not an adequate answer.
Okay.
I just thought it was kind of glib. And
Okay.
unresponsive to the question asked.
Okay.
So could we have a complete answer on that?
What would it take? Is it,
You'd have to go down and you'd have to go down to the recorder's office.
Well, I thought we weren't allowed to, like, issue permits if we didn't know who the land belonged to.
I hear what you're saying. I'll have a further conversation with John.
Okay.
Perhaps we can discuss,
And it wasn't just that
Perhaps we-
answer that I
perhaps we
thought
could-
was glib.
perhaps we
I
can
thought
discuss
many of
it,
them were.
perhaps we can discuss it with the council members.
Good idea. Do we need to approve minutes?
That's one.
We do.
All right, let's do it, shall we?
Well, there must have been something left out, because I don't remember the last meeting where we had invited the subcommittee to come. So can you add that to the minutes if that was in there? Or did I totally space that out?
I think what we asked for instruction from the council, and I think about whether they wanted us to read this whole thing and comment on all of it, or whether they wanted us to limit our purview a little bit to things that fit better with our committee's charge. And I think those kinds of instructions are usually given by the liaison subcommittee.
Right, so Stuart,
We'll add that to the minutes.
And then, and then Stuart suggested that we wait until after the next council meeting, when they decide on the extension.
Right. So we should add that to the minutes, probably.
Okay.
yeah, because it doesn't reflect.
So with that amendment, I move approval of the minutes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thanks. Give us a couple of minutes before you chat amongst yourselves.
We adjourn.
Yeah.
you.